Put aside whether you love Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump or you love Kamala Harris or you hate Kamala Harris. You should be angry at ABC because they failed the American viewers with the one and possibly only debate that we're going to see between Trump and Kamala Harris. They failed us because they were so biased. No matter what came out of Donald Trump's mouth, they real-time fact-checked him. Hey, good morning, Ron. How are you?
Good, Sean. How you doing today?
I'm great, man. And, one of these days I'm going to clean myself up. I'm going to put on a nice button-down shirt and a jacket, and I'm going to look presentable because I just look like that sad sidekick.
No, that's not it. That's not it. You have to go see Noel at Stitched. I plugged them last time, but I'll plug it again. Like, he got me this coat as well. I'm a huge fan. I don't know if Conor McGregor has the same coat. I don't know, but it's certainly possible. But he definitely hooked me up nice.
Wear well, my friend.
Thank you. The reason why I've got this on is because I was just getting off of a hit on Newsmax, and hopefully towards the end of this segment, we can play that clip. It's super brief about the comments, but one thing I wanted to jump out and discuss right out the gate, Sean, is that today is obviously a memorable day, 9/11. And while I'm sure the news networks are covering the moment of silence and words by the families of the victims, there's some important developments in the 9/11 case that I think have to be discussed by us and probably would be the basis for another episode. And so I guess folks can just consider a preview, but what better day to talk about this than a day where everybody's got 9/11 on their mind and understands the seriousness of everything that happened. There was a video that was released not too long ago, Sean, and that video was taken by a guy named Bayoumi. Bayoumi was walking around the United States Capitol and certain landmarks with one of those old 90s style recorders. Somebody else was recording. He wasn't taking selfies. We couldn't do that back then. And he was taping some of the landmarks. And the comments that he made on the videotape was very concerning. Now, that videotape was captured as a result of a raid on his UK apartment after 9/11. And it was kept in evidence by UK officials and perhaps the FBI for a while, okay? What was also on that videotape was this person having a reception for the 9/11 hijackers in his home when they arrived in the United States to begin their training. Now, we know that flight training costs a lot of money. We know that learning English, surviving in the United States without a job, fake documents, planning a terrorist operation costs a lot of money. Everybody's kind of wondering, just like with Epstein, that prior episode, where did the money come from? Nobody's answering that question. Well, there was a lawsuit filed, and it's facing a motion to dismiss right now. That lawsuit was filed against Saudi Arabia. The 9/11 victims, many of them, claim that there was Saudi involvement. Now, a lot of people have been sort of straw manning this argument, saying they're claiming that Saudi coordinated and planned the attack. That's not the allegation. The allegation is that they have some knowledge and information and involvement related to the attack because of the sheer number of Saudi citizens. So a very important motion to dismiss is about to be heard, and I suspect that a judge is going to deny Saudi Arabia's motion to dismiss, which means the 9/11 victims and their families 24 years later may actually be able to get evidence. It's going to take years to get it. Be able to get evidence related to Saudi involvement. Now, Osama bin Laden, Saudi Arabian. 14 of the hijackers, Saudi Arabian. Saudi Arabian intelligence official invited them into the mosque and threw a party for them when they arrived. Saudi Arabia is all over this case, but the 9/11 Commission report says that there's no evidence of Saudi involvement. And then, of course, we find the tape later, Sean. So I was just on Newsmax to discuss that. Here, I think we can play the reel right now.
On September 11th, commemorations taking place. We're bringing you there live, Shanksville, then back in D.C., the Pentagon, and then, of course, there at the 9/11 memorial site. Those families pursuing accountability as well, even still, from Saudi Arabia, accusing its government of being involved in the attack.
15 of those terrorists were from Saudi Arabia. Ron Chapman, a former U.S. Marine Corps attorney. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Ron, let me start with you. More than 3,000 family members of 9/11 victims are demanding both former President Trump and Vice President Harris oppose any Middle East peace deal with Saudi Arabia unless it acknowledges and is held accountable finally for its involvement in the attack on that day. Your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly, and the images that you showed were very sobering. I was in college during 9/11 and found myself at the Marine Corps recruiting station, ultimately ending up in Afghanistan. And I too want to see some accountability for Saudi involvement, just like those families. Here's the reality. We have that video from a Saudi intelligence agent. We have a reception held for the hijackers. Many of them who arrived in the United States were greeted with a reception. And we have the 9/11 Commission report sort of disavowing any Saudi involvement whatsoever. These families are simply asking for Saudi Arabia to disclose what involvement they have and the contents of their investigations. And right now, they're not saying they were involved at all. And I think that they really need to disclose. And I think that that's something that the next president must address and make sure that these families are able to uncover, because many people want to have answers.
Doug Burns, Rob Chapman joining us today for this special coverage. Thank you both, gentlemen. We appreciate your time.
You know, one of the things that I tell people all the time is we can never forget 9/11. Ever. 9/11 is a day that will stay with me, obviously, forever. I had several friends in New York. I had friends in DC. For me, it was a frightening time because I mentioned it to you before we went live with, recording this session. I was on an airplane in Boston heading to the West Coast when first plane had departed from Boston to LA. I was heading to Las Vegas for a conference. And I will tell you, the fear that it struck in the hearts and minds of my wife, my children, my family, who actually knew I was on a plane, my friends from work who knew I was on a plane going from Boston to Las Vegas. But they didn't know it was Las Vegas. They knew I was going out west. And then the fact that we had no cell service, I couldn't communicate to anybody. It was a horrific time. But what I experienced, obviously, is nothing. It was, hours of frustration, fear, anger once I knew what was going on. I could never imagine the thoughts that go through the minds of people who lost their loved ones, their friends, their associates in the World Trade Centers, who lost family, friends in the Pentagon, crashing the plane into the side of the Pentagon. Those brave men who said, let's roll, on the flight that crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. So those are the heroes. Those are the people that deserve our respect, our gratitude, our never forgetting them. And I hope people today can put aside partisan politics and respect and honor all those who lost their lives on 9/11 and the family members and friends who forever will be devastated over what transpired.
I think this is a good day to put aside our differences. There's a difference that I can't put aside that I will talk about in just a second here, because I think it's very serious. I will say, though, that you are a victim of 9/11. We all are victims of 9/11. That's terrorism. Terrorism is designed to instill fear. Like a pebble that drops in the water, the fear will ripple into a wave and, in their eyes, change the course of history. And we need to know if one of our allies knew or had some involvement in it. Just like, we'll talk about Boeing on the next episode, but just like any other company with a compliance responsibility, a nation has a responsibility to police itself, to make sure that individual actors or even government actors inside of their borders are not exporting terrorism to other places. And if they're failing to do that, then we will need to take action inside of their borders. That is called a clear and present danger to the United States. And if Saudi Arabia was hiding a clear and present danger to the United States, then that absolutely needs to be dealt with, even if it was a small faction, right? The October 7th faction inside of Hamas was a small part of Hamas. It was Hamas's duty to take responsibility and police their own and discipline those involved. That would have prevented Netanyahu from lining up on the border and deciding to march forward. That's the responsibility. And if not, another nation has to move forward. But regarding putting differences aside, I was watching the debate, Sean, and on X, I decided to take a stab because I didn't have anything better to do, and live fact check the debate. I heard Harris claim, Vice President Harris, Vice President of the United States of America, claim that January 6th was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War, Sean. Those words came out of somebody who currently holds a public office. And so I decided to just do a little...
The second highest office in the land.
Yeah. I decided to do a little research to see what other attacks on our democracy might have potentially been a little more severe. Now, I don't expect somebody who rose to the office of the vice presidency from being a former call girl in California to really understand the significance of some of these events. But Pearl Harbor might have been a bigger attack on our democracy since the Civil War. 9/11, definitely an attack on our democracy, larger than January 6th. Perhaps the Beirut bombing, I think that was 1983. I believe 282 United States Marines passed away that day, my brothers, from my unit, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. I wasn't in the unit at the time, but they're all my brothers. World War I, hundreds of thousands, millions of Russians died. And certainly it was an attack on our democracy because you let a regime like that bleed through and take over an entire continent. And it certainly has an impact on democracy. Hitler himself was an attack on our democracy. And some people think it wasn't on our soil. Well, then we should probably do an episode on the submarine that dropped off a few spies who were designated to blow up bridges on U.S. soil that were sent by Hitler and the Nazis. And then, of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis struck fear in all of us. And it was an attack on our democracy. Communism off of our shores, missiles off of our shores, many people wondering if they were going to look out on the horizon and see a bright flash and have everything they've ever known obliterated. I don't know that Kamala Harris remembers or was even alive those days, but she probably should open up a few history books before she makes a statement that some people trespassing in the Capitol was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. Sorry for my diatribe, Sean.
No. I love it. And, again, the Cuban Missile Crisis, talking about the Bay of Pigs, there's so many things that we can point to that are horrific attacks on the Republic and our democracy just throughout the last century after the Civil War. The Civil War is something that I would love to talk about because there's been so much whitewashing of what transpired during the Civil War. And it's sad because kids around the country aren't learning history the way that you and I learned history when we were in school. And the only way to ensure that we don't repeat the bad things that transpired in our history is to educate the youth. And I think one of the things that's missing, and one of the reasons why we've seen such a rise in anti-Semitism over the last year, 2 years,
because they
have forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
They have forgotten what World War II symbolized. Yep. And that is an atrocity, in my opinion. But, Kamala Harris, and I'm with you. It was really interesting to me to see those in the Democratic Party and those that were part of her preparation team coming out as late as yesterday afternoon saying, hey, we want to tamper down any expectations.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that, and again, this is not me being a conservative, because I've tried to make it crystal clear that I truly am a centrist.
Sean, at this point, we're through episode 6 now. Nobody believes that. I'm sorry, but nobody believes that.
All right, fine. I'm a bleeding heart Republican, and I'm damn well proud of it.
No. I think you're a pragmatist, and the way the winds are blowing right now kind of put you and people like me, who are patriots, who are conservative when it comes to the Constitution, the way the winds are blowing right now cause us to resist what's going on a lot harder, because we know the Constitution, we know the law, and we know how egregiously it's being violated right now. So I'm with you, but I don't think that you're a centrist, Sean.
Okay, well, we'll debate that point later, but
I'll hang up right now if you're eccentric.
I like the pragmatist part. I can live with that. Maybe that's a better term. God, I love doing these shows with you. I learned so much about myself.
Yes,
but
you are.
Here's what I would say. Last night, I sent you several text messages, probably right up until about 11 o'clock last night, talking about how disappointed I was in the debate. I felt like I didn't hear enough from Donald Trump. I didn't hear enough from Kamala Harris, which I was expecting not to hear anything from Kamala Harris. And then as I went to bed last night and I tossed and turned because I get aggravated easy. And then I woke up this morning at like 4:30 in the morning, just angry. And I thought to myself, what is it that I'm angry about? Well, I'm angry at the fact that the Republicans are stupid. They're stupid for going on to ABC with David Muir and whatever the other biased moderator's name is, Leslie, whatever it is. But here's the thing that bothers me, okay? The head of ABC is responsible for introducing Kamala Harris to her husband. Do you think that the head of ABC is not going to protect her friend? Folks, put aside whether you love Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump or you love Kamala Harris or you hate Kamala Harris. You should be angry at ABC because they failed us, the American viewers, with the one and possibly only debate that we're going to see between Trump and Kamala Harris. They failed us because they were so biased. They didn't, no matter what came out of Donald Trump's mouth, they real-time fact-checked him. But, you know, and I'm going to say something here because one of my favorite people, I love her. I don't know what your thoughts are about her, but I
was your favorite person. I'm hurt now. I'm hurt.
Well, you're one of my favorite male figures.
Okay.
But
all right.
One of my wife's obviously my favorite female figure.
She must be in earshot, I guess. Is she around there, Jill?
No, she's at work today, but she's going to listen to this and probably throw a beating at me if I'm not careful. I love Megyn Kelly. She is the bomb. And that's probably really retro 90s or 80s, but she is. And, you know, she talked about the fact in the post-debate show. And, you know, she said, listen, you know, David Muir would, and the other moderator would say, Donald Trump's a piece of shit. Kamala Harris, do you agree that Donald Trump's a piece of shit? I mean, it was three against one last night. Donald Trump was never going to come out of this debate looking like anything other than a monster. They lied. They lied about Charlottesville once again, which has been debunked. It's been debunked by ABC.
Well, I posted the video. I posted the video last night. Just go on my X feed. The whole 4-minute clip is available. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is really important.
Please.
This is really important to mention. That was not a mistake by Donald Trump or his team. The reason why Donald Trump, and we talked about this pre-show, but the reason why Donald Trump wanted the microphones muted and why Kamala Harris didn't want the microphones muted is that so that she could play the victim, right? I'm talking
That's right.
here, right? She wanted to do that whole thing again. Well, he wanted the microphones muted. Why? So that she wasn't able to play the victim, and then who gets to play the victim, right? Everybody and their mother knows. First, maybe Donna Brazile leaked those questions to Kamala Harris ahead of time, and I've seen some pretty decent reporting that there might have been some sort of earpiece. We'll see how that flashes.
Absolutely.
I'm very interested. I know Donna Brazile is not really around, but some version of Donna Brazile, right? Leaking questions, or at least talking about the tone. But no, everybody and their mother who watched that knew exactly what was going on, right? I mean, the first topic that I saw, I tuned in a little bit late. I had to finish up some work, but was abortion. Why is that conversation relevant? Because liberals want to make it relevant. It's not relevant for the president of the United States to talk about abortion. Why? Because the Supreme Court said, not a federal issue. I'm going to try to say that in my most relevant Boston accent ever. Not a federal issue. It's not at all a federal issue.
That was pretty good.
Thank you. We'll do Mark Wahlberg at some other point, but I'm going to save that for like episode 15, so hit subscribe. So here's the thing. Trump gets up there and he faces mostly liberal talking points. Abortion, January 6th. Kamala doesn't have to answer any specific policy questions. The way that you moderate a debate is Americans care about X. What is your policy or plan or record for dealing with X? Americans care about Y. What's your policy or record or plan of dealing with Y? Watch any debate with Ronald Reagan or George Bush, and you will see those types of questions. Americans are smart enough to know that that was not a debate. Americans are smart enough to know that that was a tag team. That was an uneven Vince McMahon WWF wrestling match where Kamala would tap her elbow and jump off the high wire while ABC was holding him down, and vice versa, and rinse and repeat. But here's the thing. That gets you and I talking about this, right? That gets every other commentator in the United States talking about it. And the talking points were already coming out even during the middle of the debate. But let me get to and I think we should play this clip. I'll make sure that we get it into the show. But on X last night, some brave warrior decided to post the Charlottesville comment. And the whole Charlottesville comment video is about 4 minutes long. Now, Donald Trump is interrupted during this. You'll see this. He makes a statement about some people were there were very good people, but he specifically excludes white nationalist KKK members from that group. He said those people should be, I think he said disavowed or some other language. And you'll hear it on the clip. But then he was talking about the people who were there the night before who were peacefully protesting the takedown of an American monument. And then he said, are they going to take down a George Washington monument? Are they going to take down others? And there are very good people. In that phrase, Donald Trump is standing up for people who care about our history and traditions. And ABC, who's been tasked with the patriotic duty of refereeing the debate for the highest office in the land, could have fact-checked a claim for one of their talking points and could have watched a 4-minute video about Charlottesville and could have known exactly what Donald Trump said and could have not asked such a leading question about that. That's the single piece of evidence that shows that ABC is not a news organization, it's propaganda. I mean, you want to talk about comparisons with Hitler? Let me tell you that subtle use of propaganda to fearmonger and cause one group to hate another is a Nazi tactic. It is a fascist tactic. It absolutely is. That's called fascism, right? And we shouldn't tolerate it. So everybody watch this 4-minute clip, and liberal, Democrat, foreign, I don't care where you're watching this from, ask yourselves, are these the words of a racist who is supporting KKK white nationalists who are protesting? Or is this somebody supporting the history and traditions of the United States and not erasing our history because some people disagree with it? So let's watch it.
You're putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane.
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
It's on both sides, sir. You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group. Excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue. and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
What, nationalists then?
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Who has treated unfairly, sir? I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment.
Let's look at a couple of the other things, okay? And I think people in Pennsylvania who depend on fracking know that Kamala Harris is full of crap, okay? When somebody says, my views haven't changed, well, if your views haven't changed, your position on that topic hasn't changed. I'm sorry. Unless you're doing what's politically expedient, okay? Because she knows, and her team knows, if you lose Pennsylvania, game over. There's no path to the White House for her without Pennsylvania. But more importantly, she lied.
Sorry, Sean, but do you mean the only state where one of Donald Trump's lawsuits was actually successful related to election interference, despite the fact that ABC News said that every single lawsuit was somehow dismissed? Right. Is that the state that you're talking about?
That's correct.
That's the state.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
But let's talk about the fact that she lied, okay? She came out and said numerous times, but nobody's going to call her on it, okay, in the liberal media, where she came out and said, in 2020, on that debate stage, I made it crystal clear what my position was. No, in her own words, she said, Joe Biden will never, and take it from there. Let's show the clip of what she actually said. Let's talk about the fact, and I think she's full of crap. Her and Tim Walz, if they own a gun, maybe it's a BB gun. I wouldn't trust those two with a potato gun. But for her to sit there and say last night, Tim Walz and I are gun owners, when she has been against the Second Amendment for how long? She's a liar.
Sean, no, here's the thing. Bureaucrats and government officials get to be gun owners, and we're not allowed to say anything about that. That's okay. Cops, bureaucrats, elected officials, right? Hundreds of thousands of federal agents who have nothing to do with actual law enforcement carry guns. And some of them even have those big, dark trucks that are up armored so that they can raid. Health and Human Services, and you and I know this because we are friends with a former OIG agent, right? Have the ability to kick down someone's door and arrest them for defrauding a federal healthcare program instead of saying, here's your summons, get your butt into court, right? We have armed an army in the United States. And this is a side topic, Sean, but there's a law called Posse Comitatus. Posse Comitatus is really important. In fact, I think it's probably the most important law that nobody has ever heard of. And let me just briefly explain it. Posse Comitatus says that a president is not allowed, well, actually, the government is not allowed to mobilize the United States military inside of the United States. I was responsible for this law when I was a Marine Corps judge advocate because there are many times we were asked to assist on the border, assist using our drones to find a missing toddler in the woods. We were asked to do all sorts of things that helped out the locals. And what we're not allowed to do is enforce any of the laws of the United States or any other state using our military force. This prevents Bruce Willis. I think we talked about this movie a while ago. It keeps coming up, but this prevents Bruce Willis from being a military commander and taking over the city of New York and interning people and deciding to declare some sort of martial law. It's incredibly important to prevent a coup from the United States. So how do we get around Posse Comitatus? Well, we create federal agencies, and then we give those agencies law enforcement functions. And then we give all of those law enforcement officers badges and guns. And then we ingrain them into the federal system. And next thing you know, we've got tens of thousands of IRS agents who are heavily armed. We've got tens of thousands of OIG, DEA, Customs and Border, obviously used to be referred to mostly as ICE, but we've got Homeland Security. We've even got the National Guard, which is under Homeland Security. I'm sorry, not National Guard, the Coast Guard, which is under Homeland Security and not considered part of Posse Comitatus. So they've got a Navy as well. And it's okay for them to carry guns. It is okay for them all, with a minimum amount of training from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia for a few weeks, to carry, as Walz calls them, weapons of war. Military-style assault weapons, they call them. And that's entrusted to a federal agent. But if you are seeing an influx of 20,000 Haitian migrants into your small Ohio town, you are not allowed to have that gun.
Look what just happened in Texas with the gang taking over a hotel. Armed gang members taking over a hotel. Look what happened in Aurora, Colorado, with this Venezuelan gang taking over the apartment complex.
We need to look a little deeper into that. I know we've heard some reports about that, but I just so you know, I haven't verified that yet.
Okay. Well, we'll take a closer look into it. But here's what my takeaway was from the debate last night. It was shameful. These moderators were not moderators. These were three individuals, Kamala Harris, the two moderators from ABC, that had a plan in advance to protect Kamala at all costs. I mean, come on. The biggest failure outside of Afghanistan, okay, the withdrawal, has been the border, for which Kamala Harris, like it or not, was the border czar. She was in charge of the border. There's enough clips of Joe Biden in his own terms. But I'll tell you, I don't know if you picked up on this one because she never answered the question. David Muir last night asked Kamala, did you ever meet Vladimir Putin? And she said, I met with Zelensky 5 times. She never answered the Putin question. Never once did she answer it. Why? I want to know why she didn't answer it.
The meeting with Zelensky wasn't to stop a war, because I think that you would meet with Putin as well, right? You would broker a deal. You would meet with people. No, it was to give him money. It was because they want to instill another hawkish person who's going to be big on defense spending. That's who's propping up this puppet, Kamala Harris. And if I seem a lot more anti-Kamala Harris after that debate, I absolutely am, especially after, and let's just get to the Afghanistan withdrawal, obviously near and dear to my heart. I was in a place called Kajaki, Afghanistan. We were tasked with securing a route called 611. We were trying to bring a turbine in there in order to get a power plant that was installed by USAID in the 1950s up and running. You can't just fly a turbine in for a power plant. These are very, very big things. You got to truck it in. Hard to truck things in when the Taliban is IEDing the roads, and that's not going to make it. So we were tasked with securing a road between Pakistan and this area, and it was untouched, treacherous ground. The last people that were there were the Brits. they got hit so hard that there was a movie about it. It's called Kajaki. You should look it up. I mean, there's a lot of Russian mines all over that place, and those things are pretty ugly. I think 6 British folks died. The people that were there before were the Russians, and the Russians got hit so hard there by the Taliban that every single one of them died in a Taliban attack on that hill. In fact, you can see the pockmarked bullets in the building that I used to sleep in, where the Taliban was just laying into the Russians 100%. So we secure that road. And right after we do that, just about the tail end of my deployment, we had the Quran burning situation and a few other things. Obama decides, I think we could do with 60,000 less troops in Afghanistan. I think we could do it tomorrow. Not a problem. So half of our force goes bye-bye. And we now need to entrust the local Afghan police, who we're still trying to get them uniforms that fit. We're still trying to teach them how to do jumping jacks appropriately. And honestly, that's a pretty good metric for whether or not you're a good fighting machine, whether or not at a minimum you could do jumping jacks in time, right? So we give it to them. Well, let me just tell you, my last ride down 611, my ride before the withdrawal down 611 might have taken an hour to get to where I needed to go. My last ride was an entire day because we were stopping to take care of IEDs every few meters, and people were dying along that route, and the Taliban was closing in on us. Now, let's get to the withdrawal. Anybody who stands before the American people and says that Donald Trump is responsible for that withdrawal is absolutely lying. In fact, there's a very detailed report. I posted it on X. You can look at it there. There's a very detailed report which makes it very clear that Biden saw an out in Afghanistan. He could claim that he closed down the war, and he could blame Trump at the same time by doing two things. First, not complying with the Doha Agreement. And second, rapidly withdrawing, even if it was going to be an epic failure. Because he would be able to stand before the American people and say, you see all of those refugees? That was Donald Trump's doing. Because he did it so quickly. Because we didn't agree with the agreement. Just look at the GOP report. I posted it. It's done by generals. It's a thorough investigation into the withdrawal in Afghanistan. But yet today, the White House has somebody go before the White House correspondent goes before the American public and blames Trump for the withdrawal. Now, talk about a Hatch Act, right? Right before the debate, when ABC is going to ask questions about the Afghanistan withdrawal and allow Trump to be blamed, you see the White House stand up and start engaging in those talking points. Now, that's not Kamala Harris's White House. That's Joe Biden's White House.
That's Joe Biden's.
That was a federal offense committed right there, live on TV. And nobody's going to do anything about it.
Nobody's going to do anything about it. And you know, at some point, the Republicans have to get a friggin' spine. But you're right. I've never been a fan of Kamala Harris. And I am even less so a fan of Kamala Harris after the research that we did to prepare for episode 1, the research, that I did, I know you did in preparing to be able to fact check her on the debate stage last night. Here are the things that I am so disgusted with, okay? No questions to Kamala Harris about the border failure.
Yep.
No questions to Kamala Harris about why she wasn't present when Netanyahu did a joint session of Congress to address them. She is the president of the Senate. She is the head of the Senate. She is the tie-breaking vote of the Senate. Why was she not there? You cannot come out and say, I am a huge supporter of Israel. I defend Israel. Where the hell were you when Netanyahu was here begging the United States for help and assistance?
This is where wokeness eats its tail, right? Whose lives are important? Israeli lives or Hamas lives, right?
Yeah. She talks about the importance of a two-state solution. There's never going to be a two-state solution unless Donald Trump is able to get back in there and readdress the Abraham Accords, okay? As long as the Palestinians that are tied to the terrorist organizations, not the good people, not the civilians, not the 50% who don't pick up arms, until they stop chanting from the river to the sea, there will never be a two-state solution, and I don't blame Netanyahu and the IDF for protecting themselves. You know, she talked about the fact that there has to be a measured response. In one breath, she came out and said it was a slaughter of 1,200 innocent Israelis, women brutally raped. Many of them were innocent bystanders at a concert. But then in the very next breath, she says, if that happened here in the United States, we would be measured in our response. Were we measured in our response when we went in and destroyed Iraq in 48 hours? Were we measured in our response when we went into Afghanistan and took control? The bottom line is this woman is really dumb. She's really dumb. She has no policies. They didn't question her on any Explain to me. Can you please explain to me what her economy is? I mean, you know, we have an economy that works for everybody.
It's Kool-Aid in the drinking fountain. It's Kool-Aid in the drinking fountain.
Yes, of course it is.
Yeah,
of course it is. What is it?
And that's never been a viable policy position. Let's play Oprah's book club with the American people. You get $20,000 and you get, you know, a free entrance into the United States, and you get this and you get that, and who's all going to pay for it? Oh, the super wealthy are going to pay for it. That makes a whole bunch of sense.
Where was Kamala Harris when it came to being there for the dignified transfer of the 13 brave servicemen and women that lost their lives on the biggest military debacle in our country's history, the extraction from Afghanistan? Joe Biden was there checking his watch. Where was she when it came time to reach out to the Gold Star families? She's never once reached out to them. And if you think I'm pissed, I am pissed. And I don't raise my voice often, but I'm pissed. And people, these woke, progressive, they're not even liberals. Bill Maher is a liberal. They're not even liberals. They are radicalized left progressive lunatics that want to see the earth burn. They want globalism, which will never work. Kamala Harris can never be president of the United States, because if she is, it will be a continuation of the 3.5 years of debauchery that we have seen in this country. We will be more divided than we have ever been. She is worse than Hillary Clinton.
You know, Sean, you're giving me an idea here, and I want to see what people think about it. But there's a silent majority out here that has a position on the Afghanistan withdrawal, which I think is something that we need to talk about, because I think it's essentially Benghazi, right? And listen, I was in the Combat Operations Center during Benghazi for one unit. I wasn't in that specific area, but I knew what was going on with Benghazi, and I can tell you that we had the ability to send people in there very quickly based on our capabilities. And that order was not given. In embassy situations, there's always, and this is where lawyers have to get involved, there's always a huge question as to whether it's the State Department or the military. Hillary Clinton headed the State Department, right? The military is obviously headed by different individuals, and there's always a battle as to who gets to own the battle space and who gets to take over. The State Department prefers diplomacy, and when something becomes a military issue, they try to keep the military away so that they can continue to use their diplomatic arm. Once the military gets called in, it's kind of over from a diplomacy standpoint. Well, that's why a United States ambassador died, and there was absolutely no fallout from it. But let's move off of Benghazi. This was one of the worst military failures, and it was completely preventable. There's a guy who I was connected with who runs a podcast, Leatherneck Reconnect. Fantastic podcast full of stories related to Marine Corps veterans who are kind of integrating back in. I think he's been very, very helpful in helping a lot of veterans out, and I certainly support an organization like that. But I'd be interested to have him in here and see what some of the people that he works with think about that. Because, you know, when you're in the military, you don't tend to think much in terms of liberal or conservative. You think more in terms of, is this an appropriate policy? And is this the type of person that I would want to serve under? Because it becomes very personal and important to you, right? When you're in the military, you could lose your life because of the decision that the person at the top made. When you decide to serve under President George Bush, you could lose your life because of a decision that he makes. And many people did, right? When I served under multiple presidents. When I was serving under Barack Obama, the realization was I could lose my life because of a political withdrawal to avoid high troop numbers, or because we don't want to send support in Afghanistan. And so for every military person out there, you've got to be asking yourself, should the commander in chief be somebody who has operated as the commander of chief and tried to withdraw us from combat zones and prevent global conflict? Or should it be somebody who funds Zelensky and sort of instigates a global war and is more likely to send United States troops into a combat environment with their hands tied behind their backs for political reasons? That's exactly what Barack Obama did. That's exactly what Joe Biden did. That's exactly what Kamala Harris did. They've all trained under the same sensei, right? Hawkish military policy, but try to tamp it down for the American public to make it seem as if nobody's actually getting hurt by these policies. So I'd love to see if you'd be willing to come on and talk to us about what these veterans think, because I think I would be looking to watch those veteran voting numbers. The African American voting numbers and the veteran voting numbers are going to be really, really interesting during this election. Even if there's a majority for Kamala Harris, that would tell me what American people think.
I don't know that there's going to be. I think there's enough anger in the African American community that they see her playing the race card, and that race card has not helped them improve their situation. And I think they're tired of it. I think there's a small fragment of of the population, the Black population, the African American population, that will gravitate towards that kind of rhetoric, if you will. But one other thing that I picked up on last night, and I actually laughed, and my wife looked at me and she goes, "What are you laughing at?" When Kamala Harris said, "I'm endorsed by Dick Cheney." Are you seriously admitting that? You're endorsed by one of the biggest war hawks who was tied to military defense contracts, who shot a man in the face and got away with it? And then for her to say, "I'm also endorsed by Liz Cheney." I would be mortified to ever say that Liz Cheney endorsed me. She's been thrown out of the Republican Party. Mitt Romney, another rhino. Are you kidding me? Come on.
Well, that one hurts a little bit. Honestly, that one does hurt a little bit, because
what, Mitt Romney?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that Mitt Romney would support a ticket that includes abortions just about up to birth is kind of surprising to me. I wonder if somebody got a hold of Mitt Romney's letterhead and was writing stupid messages while he was like drinking milk in his kitchen or something. I don't know. I think that might have happened. It's very possible. But, going back to the Cheney endorsement, I mean, none of that surprises me, because think about it this way. I've been saying this entire episode. The hand that moves this for Kamala Harris is the hawkish military industrial complex. Who's been accused of being the godfather of the hawkish military industrial complex? I mean, Dick Cheney was invited to the W Party specifically to advance hawkish military policies, right? We're going to get into an episode about Boeing and how Boeing was led into multiple compliance failures, partly because McDonnell Douglas kind of ate Boeing from the inside with huge defense contracts in order to build that hawkish industrial base and try to prevent somebody like Elon Musk and SpaceX from taking over market share, which they're certainly very scared of, because he's not part of the hawkish military industrial complex. Saying that Dick Cheney is endorsing Kamala Harris, it's kind of like saying that Hitler's endorsed this French government. I hate to go too far with the Hitler analogy, because I don't think that Kamala Harris or Donald Trump's Hitler, but it just really cuts against you. And it really shows who you're actually working for. And when I say French government, of course, I mean the patsy government that was put up by the Nazis after they invaded, for those people who don't have the history lesson. they were somewhat eaten from the inside. Let's go further into the debate. We have to hit abortion, Sean. We haven't hit it. I mean, we touched on it a little bit here, but there's this repeated claim. ABC brought it out, which was shocking, but of course they're not doing fact-checking for their own questions. And they led Donald Trump right into Kamala's main talking point that Donald Trump will sign a national abortion ban as soon as he gets into office.
And he gave the best answer. Please, I can't wait to hear your analysis.
I should have prepped Trump. Honestly, I'll offer to do it for free next time, because here's the answer you hit him with, and nobody's talking about this. The idea that the federal government could ban abortion comes from this old talking point related to the Comstock Act. It came out right after the abortion case was decided. And the way that the liberals tried to couch this was the Supreme Court has struck it down and handed it to the states, but there's still this old law that could be revived called the Comstock Act that would make it illegal to perform an abortion. Here's the idea. Roe versus Wade made the Comstock Act unconstitutional, so they claim. Roe versus Wade was the only guardian to prevent the Comstock Act from actually becoming or continuing to be the law. This is a 150-year-old law. There's laws that say you can't walk an alligator in the street in New York. They were made around the same time, right? No evidence that the Comstock Act has ever been used to prevent anybody from getting an abortion. And let me read the language of the Comstock Act. And I want you to tell me, or tell me in the comments section, whether or not you believe that our textualist conservative Supreme Court right now would read the language of this Comstock Act and say that it criminalizes abortion.
I'm sorry. I got Baxter. For all of you who don't know Baxter, this is my big boy, my 140-pound Newfoundland, who just had to be here. So I apologize, but hey, he's a good boy. All right, go ahead, Ron. I'm so sorry about that.
I think Baxter wanted to hear about the Comstock Act too, because he was like, I'm wondering if this has any legs. All right.
Absolutely.
The Comstock Act calls for banning the mailing or shipping of every obscene, lewd, lascivious, indecent, filthy, or vile article, matter, thing, device, or substance. All right? This bans the mailing of those things. The Comstock Act is essentially something that made it a violation of federal law to mail obscene material back in the day. And we're going to talk about the Pornhub case in the next episode. So hit subscribe if you want to see that. But this is a law banning the mailing of those materials. It has absolutely nothing to do with abortion. But of course, people don't read. So people just say, Donald Trump's going to ban abortion. He's going to sign a law. And I think they're talking about the Comstock Act. Now, is it possible? I am a Supreme Court scholar, Sean, and I am willing for anybody to fact check me on this. Is it possible, with the current precedent before the Supreme Court, for the President of the United States to ink or put forward any sort of national ban on abortion? No. Even the liberal publication Vox says this: a ban on abortion isn't possible. The way that it would happen are small restrictions on access to abortion from the national government, not allowing it to be paid for by certain various means and all of that. Certainly, but we can evaluate those bills when they get there. And that is the opposite of a national abortion ban. It's not possible. And the intelligent people at ABC know this. Kamala Harris, I question her intelligence, but she knows this. Every single person who understands these issues absolutely knows this.
I want to go back to, because I don't think people actually know what Ralph Northam, who was the governor of Virginia, actually said. Okay. And this is his direct quote. And it comes right from CNN. Okay. This is a liberal network. And here's what he was quoted. Quote, third trimester abortions are done in cases where there may be severe deformity. There may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen, end quote. Northam a pediatric neurosurgeon told Washington radio station WTOF, quote, "The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother," end quote. So ABC and Kamala saying that Trump is a liar, that this was never said, that there's no such thing as a late-term abortion, they're liars.
Absolutely lies all over this thing. And it's so blatant. And I know that Trump knows this. I know his team knows this. And I'm thinking that the news believes that people are too stupid to do their own research or listen to a show like ours where we could get into this. There was another lie. 60 Trump lawsuits were unsuccessful related to January 6th. Lie, right? First of all, Trump's response is none of them were decided on the merits. That is true. None of them were decided on the merits. Now, here's where things get a little tricky. Most of those lawsuits were not filed by Donald Trump. He has standing, but there were a lot of other groups who stood up and said, we don't like what happened with this election, and so we want to sue as well. Like those Colorado voters had their own version of a ballot lawsuit. Well, those people didn't have standing, so a lot of those are kicked. But those cases that were kicked without standing go into that 50 number. It's basically like me getting beaten up on the street and bystanders saying they got PTSD and they were kicked out because they didn't have any standing. And you say Ron Chapman lost all of his lawsuits when he got his ass kicked. And that therefore he didn't get his ass kicked, right? I mean, that is the most dishonest thing in the world. So it gets even worse. Well, of those lawsuits that Donald Trump actually filed, none of them went to a trial stage. Many of them were dismissed because they didn't plead enough information related to election interference. But here's the problem for litigants. In order to get discovery in a civil case, in order to get evidence, you need to have a claim. In order to move forward with a claim, you need to have evidence. Donald Trump does not have the ability to see what's going on inside of Cobo Hall when they decide to, well, it used to be called Cobo. I think it was a different name. That's right down the street from me right now. But when they decided to plaster billboards all over the walls, there are posters all over the wall and prevent anybody from seeing what's going on. Donald Trump can't do that. He didn't get the ability to have vision into what was happening with these election machines because he was not in discovery. And so the judges kicked all of the cases, not on the merits, not after discovery, but they kicked them based on the complaint stage after a very short hearing where you're not able to have access to any evidence. All right. If you walk around and say Donald Trump's claims were denied, you are spilling false information because none of them were denied after a trial on the merits with the full disclosure of evidence. If I have a suit against somebody, this is how it works in the United States. I give you my information. You give me your information. We take some depositions. We get ourselves in front of a jury or a judge and we put on evidence. Ask yourselves, did that happen in any single case involving election interference? Now, why are criminal charges against Donald Trump going through this for saying an election he was charged because he was saying an election was false, right? How can we have a trial go through just like that? But we are so scared to allow a trial and full disclosure of the evidence on this case. One of Donald Trump's biggest fights right now in the January 6th prosecution is access to evidence so that he can prove his election interference case, which he was denied in every single one of the cases. Rampant dishonesty going on during this debate. It's sad for the American people. In fact, I'm going to venture to guess that for the next presidential election cycle, X will hold their debate. Perhaps without even a moderator, right? Maybe YouTube will hold a debate. The American media, and I'm sorry, I work for a lot of them and I appear on them all the time, but they're incredibly disappointing when it comes to this. And I think that a platform that has constituents from all walks of life might actually be able to be centered enough to offer a fair opportunity for the American people to hear what's happening. One more thing I have to mention, Sean.
Yeah.
I don't remember a single policy question, and I don't remember a single policy answer put forward to Kamala Harris. In fact, I don't remember policy questions asked of Donald Trump. I remember hit pieces and talking points being thrown at him. And I'll leave it at that.
All right. So I wanted to do, just while you were talking, I wanted to do a quick search to see just how biased the media is the day after the debate. So I went on to Google and I typed in Kamala Harris lies during debate. Okay. The first 2 full pages that come up on Google, okay, do not mention one thing about Kamala Harris being fact-checked, okay? Every single one of them is tied to Donald Trump lies. Donald Trump lies. Kamala Harris was brilliant. CNN has the first 10 hours ago put out an article that said fact-checking, and I want you to hear how BS this is. Fact-checking the ABC News presidential debate. The very first sentence, former President Donald Trump delivered more than 30 false claims during Tuesday's presidential debate against Vice President Kamala Harris. CNN's preliminary count found as he did during his June debate against President Joe Biden. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Harris, I just can't believe this crap. Harris was far more accurate than Trump. CNN's preliminary count found just one false claim from the vice president.
Oh, one.
One.
Okay.
One.
I wonder which one that was, because without even looking at a computer,
they don't even mention it.
Without even looking at a computer, let's just make a list here. So Trump will sign an abortion ban. That's one of them. Trump responsible for the Afghan withdrawal failure. That's another one. Trump supporting racists in Charlottesville. That's another one that we've discussed on this episode. The statements that she made about her support or lack of support for fracking, that was another false statement. I'm not CNN. I'm certainly not Wolf Blitzer. And I haven't looked at a computer in a little while. But those are a few right there. And I think we could keep going, right?
Well, I will give you the 5 biggest lies from Kamala Harris debate. I'm going to go through them very quickly.
Let's hear
Number
it.
1, Kamala Harris claimed to support border security. The fact is, Kamala Harris is the border czar, as I said earlier, and could shut down the border right now if she wanted to. But under her watch, more than 10 million illegal immigrants have crossed into this country. Trump was spot on. She could leave the debate right then and there last night, go back to that beautiful building on Pennsylvania Avenue and sign an executive order, because we know Joe Biden is gone. We know he's not the president anymore. He hasn't run this country. He hasn't run his administration. It has defaulted to Kamala and the rest of the members of the cabal. But at any moment, they could go right back to Pennsylvania Avenue. They don't need the Congress for this. They could sign an executive order to shut the border down. So that's lie number 1. Lie number 2. Kamala denied supporting defunding the police. The fact is, Kamala Harris backed the movement to defund police during the riots of 2020. Not only that, she was one of the big advocates for raising money to bail out BLM rioters who burned the city to the ground. 3, Kamala Harris claimed her economic plan will strengthen the economy. The fact is, under Kamala Harris, consumer prices have soared by 19.5%, which is a staggering 350% increase compared to Trump during his administration. and it reveals the depth of economic deterioration under her leadership. Number 4, Kamala claimed she has respect for the rule of law and law enforcement. The fact is, during the riots in Minneapolis in 2020, Kamala Harris encouraged donations, as I said before, to help bail out violent criminals. And finally, 5, Kamala claimed she has a plan to lift up the middle class and working people. I'm middle class. I am a working stiff. But the fact is, under Kamala Harris, the cost of everyday household items has surged nearly 20%, with families now paying as much as 50% more at the gas pump. The bottom line that I have for any normal, sane person watching that debate last night should walk away from it going, that wasn't a debate. It was a 3-way thruple against Donald Trump. He was beaten into the ground. He was never going to win. But I will say this, that man fights and fights and fights. He will go into the lion's den with ABC where he knows he's not going to be treated fairly. He will go sit on The View where he knows he will not be treated fairly. He will go to CNN. He will go to CBS. He will go to MSNBC. He will go into any liberal network. Do you know he and J.D. Vance have sat for more than 50 interviews since the Republican Party nomination?
Yeah, even Theo Vaughn got to interview him. I mean, he's digging deep here. Hilarious.
And Kamala has sat for one with her big white whale security blankie.
John,
the great white security blankie.
I've got to depart from you. I don't think any of those things that you pointed to were actually lies by Kamala Harris. And I have a hard time saying Kamala. I don't know why. It's just difficult. And I hate to depart from you on this, but here's my position. I know what a lie is. A lie is a materially false statement made with knowledge that it's false, right? The first part of that would be materiality. I mean, you and I cover this in healthcare cases all the time. What does materiality mean? It means it matters. I hate to be circular, but it matters. That means you have to say something that matters in order to actually lie. Well, how does Kamala speak? She doesn't speak in terms of fact, of definite fact, objective fact. I have done this. She says the same old liberal talking points that we normally hear. I help the middle class. I care about law enforcement. I want to support and what do we use these words like empower? Those aren't objectively verifiable pieces of information. And so the one way that you could rack up more lies when you're fact checking is you put somebody who says objective things against somebody who has real trouble saying anything meaningful and objective. And then you start calling out that person who makes objective statements. None of the things that she said had enough substance to even come close to being a lie. Of course, many of them are misleading, yes. But she never came out and gave us any single fact about what she's ever done or about any policy position that she has. Yeah, exactly. That's it.
She has no policy.
Yep. So she has to say, I care and I will empower and I will support.
But she doesn't care. She doesn't care. And saying that she cares is a lie because she doesn't care. And, you know, the only truthful thing that came out of her mouth last night was that her entire career, she has served the master of politics. That was the only truthful thing that came out of her mouth last night. Now,
who's that?
Who's that?
Yeah,
it's the cabal. Whoever was able to put her into power, from the mayor of San Francisco to, Biden. And here's one of the things, when she called Trump a racist last night, okay, and she did. She called Trump a racist. Why didn't Trump come back immediately and say to her, well, isn't it true, Kamala, that you work for a racist? Because according to you, during the 2020 debates, you said to Joe Biden, you're a racist.
Well, I think that there's a bit of a thou doth protest too much. If he tries to change the subject and say Joe Biden is a racist, I think he's condoning the idea that you can just levy these sorts of racial attacks against people and this sort of race baiting ideology. And I don't think he supports that at all. I don't think he wants to walk around.
He doesn't.
He's too good for that. I don't think he wants to walk around and say Joe Biden is a racist and that's why you should vote for me. I don't think that makes any sense. And I also think that Donald Trump understands that Black people in America no longer want to hear white people calling each other racists while simultaneously not doing anything to help out the systemic issues in our culture and in the United States. You know, I said this not too long ago. I got some heat for it, but I'm completely okay with this. Gun violence in the United States is not a gun rights issue. It's a social justice issue. And everybody understands that gun violence is predominantly in the United States, gang violence and suicide. Suicide is a mental health crisis. We're not talking about that. Instead, we're talking about common sense background checks, which you can already do. I don't understand what these things mean, but they're not talking about mental health. So gun deaths are a complicated issue. Suicides are one of those things, and helping out mental health in the United States is a good way to help solve that. The other part is gang violence. Gun restrictions in Chicago and Washington, D.C. have done nothing to assist with preventing gang violence. What helps prevent gang violence? Well, it's the same thing that we talked about in episode 1, Sean, with that rapper who couldn't get any witnesses to say that he didn't kill this young man in the street. It's that people they don't have the freedom to say something when they see something in their community because they too are afraid. They don't have the ability to help out the police and the local justice system in capturing those people who are responsible for gang violence and lowering gun deaths in their community because they don't feel free to speak up. Now, what can we do about that, Kamala? Maybe instead of supporting our friends all over California, we could start getting serious about the specific issues that are facing crime in our nation. You take a page out of Malcolm Gladwell's book. I love Malcolm. He's a tremendous liberal and he's definitely Canadian. But when you look at the Kansas City model of policing and you look at what Malcolm Gladwell has to tell us about this, he's got the key to solving social justice issues in between the pages of his book. And nobody wants to follow that. Instead, they want to continue to pander to this gun rights issue. And here's the thing. Black America understands now that these are all distractions, that this race baiting bullshit, that Joe Biden standing up in front of a gospel church and claiming that he's just like you because he comes from common people is pandering. And while that might be okay for the minister who gets to have Joe Biden in his congregation and sips on a little bit of power from that, it's not okay for the people down the street who aren't getting anything from the current policies, not getting anything from the current policing, not getting anything from the current drug war. And I think they hope and believe that under somebody like Donald Trump, who will be tough on justice, but also open up opportunities for people, that they may be able to rise up. And that this gun rights social justice issue problem will actually be resolved by a guy like Donald Trump. Because us continuing to say thoughts and prayers after another school shooting doesn't do anything to prevent young kids from feeling so trapped and isolated that they go in and commit these heinous crimes, right? This is not a solution. Charging parents, not a solution, Sean.
I kind of differ a little bit on that last statement that you made because I believe ultimately a parent is responsible for the actions of their child, especially if they are not being responsible gun owners by locking their guns up, by making sure the chamber is clear, by making sure that the clips aren't readily available next to the gun, and loaded. So I do believe a little bit. I have a different take on that. I think what just transpired here in Barrow County in Georgia last week with this young guy, 14-year-old kid who, shot multiple people. 4 people, I believe, died. 9 others were injured. I don't know if you saw it the other day on Facebook, but they had to lock down. They had to lock down all the schools here in the town where I live. I don't want to get too much into it because I know who the person is who did it, but he posted something to Facebook that said, if y'all are tired of dealing with the schools, you can take, and I'm paraphrasing, you can take comfort in knowing that I am headed to 5 of the schools here in Troup County and I'm going to shoot them up. I mean, that's insanity. This was on Facebook the other day.
That's crime, Sean.
So for me, it is crime. For me, I look at it this way. I am a responsible gun owner. I've been handling guns since I was a kid. Okay. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. The measures, to your point, that have been put in place with gun control in Washington, D.C., in Chicago, in New York, in other places like that, have done nothing to curb the violence, because it's not law-abiding citizens who are breaking the law. It's criminals who are breaking the law. It's illegal aliens who are breaking the law. Trump, David Muir last night is a liar, okay? Plain and simple. When he came out trying to fact check Trump and say, well, crime rates in this country are down, Trump gave the most brilliant response to that last night, which is, sure, the numbers are down because they didn't include the cities with the worst crime rates.
Absolutely.
And he's right.
Yep.
And he's right.
Well, here's the other part of that. It's even more scary than that. Crime rates are down historically across our country since the 1970s.
Yeah.
What happened in the 1970s? Abortion. Freakonomics talks about this in the book, and I think they make a pretty good case for the idea that Democrats supporting abortion is probably more related to a surreptitious effort to try to lower crime rates than anything else. I mean, that's not me saying that. That's a pretty popular New York Times bestseller articulately making the case. But let me clarify the gun comments. What I mean to say that charging parents won't stop this, it's not an answer. Certainly parents who commit some sort of crime of negligence or have not properly locked up their gun, if that is a law to lock up your gun, which I don't necessarily object to, they can be charged for that sort of crime. Yes. But what I'm talking about is the overall causal fallacy. Every time there is a school shooting, that we want to try to apply a solution to that school shooting problem as a way to solve all gun deaths in the United States. Now, some gun deaths are because of school shootings. Some gun deaths are because of suicide. Some are because of gang violence. Some are because of improper handling of a weapon. Each one of these things has its own independent cause that can be explored by intelligent people in order to come up with a solution. But instead, because taking guns away happens to be a liberal talking point, they can't let a good emergency go to waste, and they use it as an opportunity to make this fallacy and try to convince the American people that this is a great opportunity to start thinking about taking guns away from everybody. So I appeared on Real American Voice to talk about that shooter's father just yesterday, and I did a bit of research into the case. Here's what we've got. The cops weren't even so convinced that this boy made the threat. In fact, many times the cops on the video, and I watched it, repeated over and over again, I don't even know where this information came from related to the threat. We're just here to check on it. Do you have access to firearms? Yes. And the father says, hey, listen, if this is true, I will lock it up and I will keep it away from him. But he hunts with me. We go out. He just shot his first buck the other day. So here's the idea. The violation of a criminal law is not something that we look at with hindsight. It is a crime when it happens. So after hearing that sort of lukewarm discussion of a potential threat, this wasn't the FBI, that was misreported. Local police came down, and the kid denied even having a Discord active at the time. And the cops, watch the tape if you want to, the cops weren't even convinced that this was the kid who made the threat. In fact, a neighbor called it in and they went to a different address. They weren't even sure that they got the right kid. And so what you're saying there is it's a violation of the law, apparently, for a father, a violation of murder statutes, not just the law, murder statutes, jail time, murder conviction, for that father to hear that lukewarm statement that was uncorroborated from the police and say, I'm not going to lock all my guns up and take them away from my son. At that point in time, this father had no other reason to believe that his son was a danger. In fact, he repeatedly says on the videotape, I am up at the school all the time to help this kid with this transition. His mother left because she didn't pay the rent and they were evicted from their last house. Dad's a working father. He's working midnights. He's trying to take care of his son. And this father is up at the school constantly to talk to the school counselors to make sure he's set up in classes and he's got a good transition. The guy on the videotape looks like a pretty good father to me, right? I mean, we all probably would have preferred that he would have locked up the guns just to be safe. I mean, in Michigan, that's our law. We have to do that. But is it the crime of murder to not do that is the first question. I say no, because the elements aren't there. Maybe some sort of negligence. That would be up for a jury. But does that solve the systemic gun issues in our country? And what is the current administration doing to actually prevent kids from getting hit in drive-by shootings, gang violence, a murder a day in the city of Detroit, most of them going unsolved? What are you actually doing about that? Why isn't that getting publicized? And why aren't we helping people solve those crimes? Because, Sean, those people matter too.
100%. I'm with you. I'm with you. I think, listen, these are the conversations that need to be had. We need to put down these talking points, these, 5-second, 10-second sound bites that get people political props and, get them their 15 minutes of fame. I think if we really want to address these issues, I agree with you. They are social justice issues and they have to be addressed. And the problem that we have is that the liberal establishment doesn't want to have these conversations, because by having these conversations, it de-emphasizes their role. It takes away the power that they have and that they possess over the less fortunate.
You have to say unpopular things.
Yeah, you have to say popular things.
You have to say unpopular things. You have to say that perhaps communities can help solve crime, not just federal dollars, right?
100%.
You have to say that. Mm-hmm.
Yep, 100%. Well, listen, I think for me, the takeaway is that I think Trump held his own last night. There were things that obviously I wish, he would have maintained his composure a little bit better. I think he fell into a couple of traps with Kamala, but then I try to put myself into his situation, and I think to myself, if I had 3 people attacking me at one time, spewing lies and saying that at the end of the day, ultimately, I'm a piece of shit no matter what comes out of my mouth, and then they go to my competitor on the other side and say, he's a piece of shit, right? I think I would lose my temper as well. And I think given what he was subjected to last night, I think he did a good job. I think he made his point the best in his closing comments. I think his closing comments were excellent. He said, you can't run from the last 3.5 years. You own this economy, you own this border, and you own the disasters that have come with yours and Joe Biden's incompetence. I wish he would have stopped when ABC asked him the question about her race, where he said, I don't really care what she is. But of course, you knew they were going to push and push until they got that soundbite. And that's the one trap that I wish he would have avoided. But I think he was fair in what he said. At one point, she came out as the first Indian American woman to be a senator. Then it was no longer important for her to represent the Indian American heritage. And it was now important for her to be named the first Black vice president female in the United States. Well, we never heard that she was black up until she said it. And I'm not trying to be an idiot here, but think about this. Her name, Kamala, is an Indian name.
It's fine, Sean, but that question was a stupid question to begin with. It never should have been asked.
It was a stupid question.
It never should have been asked in a presidential debate. It was race baiting from behind.
Of course it was.
A news podium.
But that was my point.
I'm with you. Yeah. I think that one of the biggest problems with that debate, and, shit in and shit out, right? The questions, shit in. Charlottesville, you said racist things and you love the KKK. You kissed their feet. What do you have to say about that? Or was there anything you regret from January 6th? Jesus, the man is facing criminal indictment and he has a Fifth Amendment right not to testify against himself. And on national TV, in a debate, you ask such an unintelligent question and try to get him to make a comment about regret related to January 6th. Come on, tell me that wasn't an absolute trap. I feel like Jack Smith was probably sitting in the back of the debate room with a freaking camcorder trying to capture the answer to that just to make sure. And he might say it louder one more time for the jury if you had anything you regret. That was an absolute trap. But Sean, let me just close this out.
Yeah, please.
By talking about something really important, because I think we ended up getting wonderfully fiery today, but I think we need to focus on what matters. There was a former president, Theodore Roosevelt, and he delivered a speech. And that speech is very important to me when we talk about pundits and critics, right? It's called Man in the Arena. And if people haven't heard it before, then you're going to hear it for the first time. And if people have heard it before, maybe we can apply it in some sort of context. And please go to TikTok or YouTube and check the audio of this, because I think you really need to hear Roosevelt say it in his voice. My voice is certainly not good enough. He said, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better." He says the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, who was the subject of an attempted assassination, and sweat and blood, somebody who's faced multiple political prosecutions across the United States, who strives valiantly, who stands up and raises his fist in the air to show the American people that he's okay, who errs, who's not perfectly sinless, right? Who comes short again and again because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, to move forward for the American people, to sign the 9/11 bill that gave survivors the ability to receive compensation after years of fighting on this most important day, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly. That means a lot to me when we compare these two people. We have Kamala Harris, somebody who's never done anything, who was anointed to her position, who hasn't actually won a primary, who's never actually been in the arena, who has been hidden from the American public during her entire vice presidency. And then when asked to defend the policies of the current president, she says, "I am not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is not running on this stage today." She has taken herself out of the arena. She says, "I have never been in the arena." And she willfully says that. Why? Because the people who vote for her do not care if she's ever been in an arena. But I know that real Americans want somebody who's been in the arena. They want somebody who has a bit of dust on their face. They want somebody who's not perfect. They want somebody who knows what it feels like to be tapped with a political felony, something that so many other people in the United States have actually faced. They want somebody who's made a few bucks. They want somebody who's paid taxes. They want somebody who's built companies and sold them and built companies and failed. Kamala Harris laughs about Trump's bankruptcies of several companies because she thinks that he must be a terrible leader. What would you say about the person who never actually built a company on their own? What would you say about somebody who hasn't handled dozens of employees, who could remember that Marcy was about to have a baby in the next few weeks down in accounting? Somebody who didn't know what it was like to walk in and know that you are responsible for the lives and the well-being of hundreds and hundreds of people. We want that kind of person. We don't want the person who sits on the sidelines willingly, chuckles at the other, and occasionally throws little race and woke grenades into the arena just to see if somebody will stumble. That's not the president we want, Sean.
I'm with you. And that was so well said, and it's prophetic. I want somebody who has the battle scars. Trump has a lot of warts on him. There's no doubt. But the simple thing for me that it comes down to is this. And this is what it should come down to for all Americans. Were we better off under the Trump administration than we have been for the last 3.5 years under the Harris-Biden administration? That's what it comes down to for me. Economically, we are not better. Safety, we are not better. Crime, we are not better. Divisiveness, we are not better. This country is in chaos. This country at times looks like a third world country. And we need serious people to do a serious job. Mm-hmm. And while I don't necessarily care for all of the things that sometimes come out of Donald Trump's mouth, I would rather have Donald Trump with all of his warts than somebody like Kamala Harris, who has zero experience. She got not one vote to be the Democrat nominee in this 2024 presidential race. She was anointed. It was a coup against a sitting president of the United States. She was the first person out in the primaries in 2020. She failed to garner 1%. And folks, remember this, okay? And this will show you the dishonesty of the liberal media. Weeks prior to Biden having the debacle on the debate stage, every liberal outlet was calling for the removal of Kamala Harris from the future ticket because she was a drag on the ticket. She was a drag on the party. She is a word salad. She doesn't put out cohesive statements. She doesn't put in the work to prepare. Last night was nothing more than her spending 6 days locked away in a hotel room learning sound bites. There's no doubt that she was given access to some of the questions, or at least the concepts for what the moderators were going to talk about. Because Kamala Harris, in her entire political career, has never been prepared for anything. I think the most important debate has yet to come. And people typically always say the vice presidential debate is not important. Well, I disagree.
Oh, yeah. No, I disagree because it's first of all, it's the future of the Republican Party, right? I mean, we know, I know we're closing this out, but I know we've got J.D. Vance has connections to Silicon Valley. He's relatively young. He served in the Marine Corps. So I immediately know that I can trust him, and we can differ on a few positions, but for the most part, we're going to be okay. I also know that Walz is going to pay deeply for his ridiculous couch comments. He's going to pay deeply for his ridiculous stolen valor comments. He's going to pay deeply for the fact that he allowed 1,000 buildings to burn in a major city in his state and prosecuted a whopping 12 people and dismissed the cases against most of them. He's going to burn for his policy on justice. I know J.D. Vance is going to step on his throat, and he is not going to let up the entire debate. And he is going to show that you don't pick some guy out of nowhere to become the vice president of the United States because you needed an old white man to try to appeal to old white men. That's not what we should be doing at all, right?
The biggest mistake Kamala Harris made was selecting Tim Walz. She should have selected Josh Shapiro. That would have guaranteed her the election. That would have given her Pennsylvania. That would have given her everything that she needed, because I'm going to tell you something. Tim Walz is not a debater. J.D. Vance is one of the most brilliant people I've ever heard debate. This guy is relentless. He has beaten the crap out of everyone that has ever come at him with garbage. He is unbelievable, and I cannot wait to see the debacle that transpires. And I wouldn't be surprised if they pull the plug on the debate.
I wouldn't be surprised too. I'll tell you this. I think Shapiro could have potentially said no. What is he going to do? Stand up in front of, he probably would have sat down with Kamala, and here's how the conversation would have gone. Kamala, happy to talk to you about this, but I want to know your policy on Israel. Kamala, my policies have not changed. They have not changed. Oh, okay. So you want a two-state solution. You sort of support Israel, but you don't like Hamas. Yes, my policies have not changed. Okay. Well, that's not definite enough for me, because when I stand up in front of my people, I'm going to have an actual solution to what's going on, and I'm going to have this ticket condemn Hamas. Are you able to condemn Hamas? Well, I would condemn anyone that engages in terrorism, right? Ironically, with that right there, she walks herself into almost the same comments that they claim that Donald Trump made inappropriately about Charlottesville, but she moves forward into condoning Hamas. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Hamas and some of the student protests, we've got an episode that we recently did on that. Feel free to
and it was awesome.
Take a look through the awesome catalog. I mean, we showed an absolute link. But hey, listen, Sean, this was a fantastic episode. I'm very happy to cover the debate with you. If you want to learn more about some of these topics and some of the justice issues, take a look at my book, Unraveling Federal Criminal Investigations. You'll find out why we are so fiery about making sure that we maintain control of our government and the pages inside that book. Reach out to Sean and I on LinkedIn, YouTube, X. The links are all down below in the show notes. And make sure you click like to survive, as my friend Sean likes to say. And for all you out there, we'll be with you next week. And we look forward to bringing more content. Next up is Boeing, and potentially a nice episode about the investigation against Pornhub. I think you're going to learn a lot about how the government is trying to control that field, as well as levy investigations against a lot of American companies in the new form of communism that we're seeing today. So with that, have a great week, everybody.